I am here today to talk about something that church leaders seldom want to talk about. I know this to be true because while writing my book, Wounded No More, an individualized plan to heal church wounds, almost every leader I talked to said I should not write this book. Frankly, I was rather shocked by that. On the other hand, congregants told me that this book was sorely needed and they were glad I was writing it. Let me be clear, my book is not a church bashing book. Rather, it's a call for the church to come up higher, to face its problems, and to restore those that have been hurt because of them. I approached the project of writing this book with a great deal of fear and trembling, because in all honesty, I'm talking about the bride of Christ, which is the church. And I certainly don't want to get in trouble with God. And I'm sure you can appreciate that. But we must be very real. Healing requires honesty and sometimes brutal honesty. We cannot fix problems if we won't even acknowledge them. We certainly can't help the people who have been hurt if we're in total denial. Too often the cries of the hurting are ignored. They are told to forget it, forgive it, just move on. Sometimes victims, and I use that word lightly, are blamed. No one has a problem with the person that you're talking about, so it must be about you. No one else sees what you see, so hello, maybe it's you. It's sad, but people are often blamed or shamed, or they have their credibility questioned just for pointing out a problem and saying, hey, this affected me deeply. Two comments about problems have really spoken to me throughout my whole life. I often refer to this. And I first heard these two comments, I believe from Dr. Schuller of the Crystal Cathedral many years ago. The first is that problems do not age gracefully. The Catholic Church scandals have certainly proven that to be true. The second is that problems never leave us the way they found us. They either make us bitter or better. We need to decide in the middle of all of this how we want to come out at the other end. When I'm in the middle of a problem, I often say to myself, Connie, how do you want to come? What kind of attitude do you want to have when you come out of this? My hope for you is to reject bitterness and to embrace a better life. More than anything, I want to convey to you today that God sees, God knows, and God cares, even if people don't. Many of you have suffered in silence for years. You've left the church. Sometimes you've even left the faith altogether, and that saddens me. And that was one of my motivations for writing the book. If you remember nothing else from our time together today, please know that God loves you very much. And he longs for you to be healed. After all, he said, I came to heal the brokenhearted and to set the captive free. I too was hurt in the church. That was another reason for writing this book, and I was healed of it. A lot of it stemmed from my very unexpected and unwanted divorce. I had 3 kids at the time, along with some emotional problems that were kind of in the mix there. One of the ways that God heals me was in the middle of praise and worship one day. I got a vision. I'll try to describe it to you. It was as if I was standing behind myself and looking over my shoulder. The only way I know to describe it is, you remember the opening scene in Star Wars where you see all these words coming off in kind of a straight plane and going off into outer space? Well, it felt like a whole bunch of words were coming off my shoulder and going into outer space like that. Words like anger, disappointment, fear, pain, bitterness. Only instead of going all the way into outer space, it was as if a picture of God raised itself up. It was like a skull, and the eyes were like on fire. And as I was watching, all these words went into that fire and were consumed. And the description of God being a consuming fire suddenly made a lot of sense to me. And I began to feel that the burdens had lifted. At that moment, I knew I'd experienced some healing. You might say, well, Connie, I don't have visions. That's okay, because healing is not a formula, and that was part of the premise of my whole book. Because we are not cookie cutter people. You won't find in my book an exact formula for being healed. I share with you some of what happened to me and some foundational things that will definitely help you. But if you think about it, even in physical healing in the Bible, God healed people very differently. To the one man, he said, pick up your bed and walk. To another man, he said, go dip yourself in the Jordan River 7 times and you'll be healed. For the blind man, he spit on the ground, mixed it up, put the dirt on his eyes, and the man was no longer blind. So if God heals people differently in the physical sense, I also believe he does that in spiritual and physical, spiritual and emotional healing. Maybe you've even gone through some type of healing program. Maybe it didn't work. I want you to be encouraged today, because your healing will come, because God knows the key to unlocking your healing. Today, I want to talk about 4 things. First of all, I want to acknowledge the problems in the church. Second of all, I want to drop some hope for healing into your heart. Thirdly, I want to discuss some of the benefits of healing. Fourth, I want to take you through an exercise to help you revisit what happened in a whole new, maybe in a different way than you're used to. But before we do that, let's maybe we could lighten the load a little bit and just, I don't know, tell a joke or two. Let me find my notes here. Oh, goodness, oh, here we go. The first is a young little boy was standing in the foyer of the church, and he noticed a plaque on the wall with a bunch of people's names on there, and it was the names of people in the congregation who had died in the different wars. And so the little boy, went up to the pastor and he said, "Who are these people on the wall here? Why are their names up there?" He said, "Oh, those are people that died in service." And the little boy said, "Was that the first service or the second service?" It was pretty funny. Another cute story is a little boy was standing next to his mother, and she was, rifling through an old Bible, and a leaf fell out, a fairly big leaf. And the little boy looked at it and he said, "Oh, that must be the pants of Adam. Adam's leaf fell out of the Bible." The third one is a priest went to a yard sale and bought an old lawnmower, and he got it home and he kept pulling the cord. It wouldn't start. So he was pretty aggravated, and he took it back to the guy and he said, "Look, I can't even get this thing started." He says, "Well, that's because you have to cuss in order for it to work, in order to get it started." And he says, "Look, I'm a priest. I don't even remember how to cuss, and I shouldn't be cussing anyway." And the guy said, "Don't worry, just keep pulling on that cord and it'll come back to you."